Hey everybody, I actually put it in the script. Well, it's always nice when the stream launches with no technical drama. That's pretty nervy writing for my part. I've upgraded the streaming software, boys and girls, so that we can go with the full gusto of 1080p today. So let me know if it's all glitchy or if the audio is bad. So we're bringing our guest in at high res as well. Of course, the music in that intro was the wonderful Mr. John Cordy playing a stomp patch that he wrote on the Litigator and Tweed Deluxe, a double model. So thanks, John. I saw John in the chat there already. This 5 Watt World live stream is brought to you with the support of Ish Guitars. I've brought on a sponsor for the live streams. I'm really thrilled to be working with Ish, and I'll talk more about Ish later in the stream, in the middle somewhere. I'd like to thank Bebe for being here to moderate for us, of course, as always. When I see him jumping in and answering questions in the chat, I always hear Mike Myers, from Wayne's World in the back saying, "We're not worthy. We're not worthy." It's in the back of my head. So today's another chance to stump Bebe. I'm still doing my best, and I'm trying here. I won't yammer on too long because today's all about the guest. I've got a sheet of questions here. I imagine we're going to have a lot of questions in the stream. Remember to put at 5 Watt World, and Bebe and I will do our best to pull up the questions and feed them to Ben. We're going to bring Ben on. I told him I would leave him in the green room while I do his intro, and that's to not embarrass him on screen. This is one of those things where you don't know if it's possible unless you ask. And I asked, and I was delighted to say that Ben, the sound design manager at Line 6 is here with us today. And be honest, like many of you, it comes to, learning the Helix universe. I rely on my good friend, John Cordy, and it's really John's fault that Ben's here because John repeatedly, I remember him saying over and over again, I'm using the Litigator model for this patch. This isn't an actual Dumble so much as a Dumble from the mind of Ben Adrian. So we have that mind with us today. And I have some questions, as I said, that I collected from Instagram and from YouTube, and we'll be relying on all of you in the chat. Again, remember to use the at 5 Watt World. Everything else is anything you don't have the at 5 Watt World. I'll assume you guys are talking among yourselves. And, 5 Watt World is a community. So please do talk among yourselves in the back row there. As I like to say, you guys are 5 Watt World. I just make the videos. Okay, enough about me. I'm going to bring Ben on here, see if I can do this right. Add to stream. Oh, there he is. There he is. All right. So let's see. Well, I got questions already, so we can't do that. I'm going to kick us off. I did share the questions with Ben that I had collected in advance so that he could, gather his thoughts, but also his corporate responses, which I know he's well versed in. So let me do a couple of those to kick us off while people throw their questions in here. Let's see. And I will actually attribute them as we go. Sephorus from YouTube says, now that the Line 6 and Ampeg are both under the same umbrella, will we see more Ampeg models in the Line 6 products? It would be great to get a few of their guitar amps in the options as well. I'll add to that question that there are very few amps, vintage or otherwise, that haunt me, but the sound of a 63 Reverber Rocket is one of those sounds. So what do you think about that, Ben?
Well, I mean, honestly, what I'd really like to do is build Ampeg guitar amps for Ampeg. That would be fun.
That would be fun.
There's no plans to do that as far as I know, but
okay,
maybe it'll happen. I don't know.
There you go.
Really, I love those old circuits too, Jets and stuff like that. It was fun getting Ampeg because then all the Ampeg bass amp models we could suddenly just use the real name.
Right.
So that was fun, and I hope to maybe do some guitar amps. I feel like Ampeg is kind of, they've always been the also ran,
Yeah.
They've always made really cool amps, but I struggle to think of any guitarists who have used an Ampeg amp as their main guitar amp all the time, especially in the amps pre like the V20 or VT22, V4.
Yeah.
I can think of a couple that use that, but like.
Well, I'd say their big moment in the sun was when the Stones, had V4s out on the road, right?
Oh yeah.
That was it. That was it.
And,
like one season. Right. Yeah, exactly. We have a top chat already.
Cake used an Ampeg amp, maybe? I don't know.
Who's that?
Cake, the Sacramento.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
I think he might have used an Ampeg. I'm just pulling weird trivia out of my head now. The answer is I don't know.
Okay.
We work pretty fast in sound design. So sometimes we get a piece of gear or we get an idea or someone has a brainstorm and we try to do it fast and something shows up in an update.
Yeah. Well, and it's not in the list of questions, but there's an amp behind you and in the thumbnail that we will talk about. Your trainer. We will talk.
Yeah.
We'll have you talk about your trainer. We have a $5 top chat from ATB Pop. Just wanted to know when. Let's see. I really just want to know what went into the Ventu design. I absolutely love it, and just curious to know more.
All right. Some inside baseball here.
Well, yeah, you know this guy. He's like lobbing them up for you.
All right.
All right. Swing away.
Do I know this guy? I don't know.
No. Yeah. It could be ATB. It could be the vintage store in England.
But so I've had some really good experience with orange amplifiers, like the old ones, or 80s or 120s. And like it's one of those where if you can get it up to stage volume, like I borrowed one when my band was playing on tour, and I actually got to crank it up. I'm like, oh wow, this is outstanding. And then I've also had that experience with some little like tweed style amps, like the ones that are kind of forgotten. Like I have one behind me. I don't know if you pick up the corner there. It's a little bit of a tweed Vibrolux clone.
Oh, is that
I got?
Vibrolux? Nice.
Yeah, and so the Von 2 was I kind of wanted, like, what if you made a high dollar boutique amp, but instead of taking the inspiration from like a blackface Fender or a Marshall or a tweed Bassman, you took it from an orange and a Fender tweed. I kind of put my favorite little aspects of each of those circuits. So it definitely has something like a cathodiene phase inverter in the model. There is the control, like the FAC control in the orange, which is basically a high pass, so you can get rid of all the highs and then distort the amp, and then you can get a tight distortion, or you can put all the lows back in and get kind of a more loose distortion. The mid-range knob is pretty active. The bass and treble are in the negative feedback loop of the power amp rather than inside the preamp circuit. So everything is a gain control. And I wrote up a little mini essay to go with the software release when it came out, and it was like, everything's a gain control on this amp. It's like you can really overdrive the mids with the mid. You can overdrive,
Right. Hearing you talk about this stuff, I realized that we skipped a part that you and I actually touched on the other day, which is how does Ben know so much about the inside of amplifiers? And we're going to talk about your trainer, but talk a little bit about your background and how it is, like how much work you did on physical amps, and kind of talk about how you ended up sitting in the chair you're sitting in. Not this one, but at line 6.
That would be a strange
gig. Right.
I bought the chair off Craigslist. So I have a TED Talk that is never going to get made called "How I Learned Everything in Life Through DIY Punk Rock," which is, don't ask for anyone's permission. Don't wait for someone to give you money. Just go out there and start doing it. And if people come along, they come along. And if they don't, who cares? So I was interested in when I was in a band, I wanted to make records. And for the price of a weekend in a studio, you could buy recording gear. So I bought some recording gear, learned how to record. Decades later, somehow that became my job. I worked in a recording studio. My amps would break, my pedals would start to get weird. I would just get a electronics book from the library, get an old textbook. I was good in science and math. I just started digging into amps and effects, and I had some massive failures. I wanted a black panel Fender amp in the late 90s. I couldn't afford one because I was a poor early 20-something.
Yeah. And
so I bought a broken one. And I took it apart, and I just like, what can I do? This is a $400 Pro Reverb. It's been thrashed. I can't make it any worse. So I took like a year, and I restored the amp, and I got it up, and it was wonderful. And it just taught me so much. Next thing I know, my friends are bringing me amps to fix. My friends are coming to me to have their band recorded. But all this is done just because I just loved it, and I wanted to do it. And I was not afraid to, dig into a textbook and use my recreation time to sit around and just, to explore what I'm interested in. From there, I moved to the Bay Area. I ended up getting a job in a recording studio called Mr. Toad's. That was awesome and taught me so much. I learned how to do studio tech stuff, learned how to line and calibrate tape machines. And every time I learned something new, it's like I didn't want to learn just how to do it, but I wanted to learn the why behind it. So every time I learn something, it's not just, oh, if you change this capacitor, it gets brighter or darker, but why does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is going on electrically? And then from then on, I just happened to kind of luck out where I was moving down to LA, and I found this job listing at Line 6, and it was like, you must have a knowledge of a history of vintage gear. You must know how to read schematics. You must be able to like repair tube amps, recording engineer experience a plus, and it's basically everything I was doing for fun or because I had my own band.
Right.
And
Fun.
it was kind of a little bit of, it was just a lifetime of preparation that I didn't know I was working up to. And yeah.
And now it's how many years later?
It's a little over 10 years.
Nice.
No, 11. It's just been 11 years. Holy cow.
You lost one there.
Yeah. I've got my little trophy over there that says 10 years, and I know I've had that for over a year. So.
You should have that where prominently displayed, where that stomp is, right?
Hold on, here we go.
Oh, there we go.
You asked for it.
Everybody sees the rock man.
I don't know.
There we go. Oh, that's lovely. It's nice. Somebody
can see right through it.
Oh yeah, totally readable. That's great. All right.
There you go.
Thank you. That's good. That was exactly what we needed, because that explains, that will actually fill in the gap as we do some of these more technical stuff as we come along here. The other thing that Sephiroth wanted to know, it was something, he says, does he ever have time to build any of his old pedals? He had some cool designs, but I imagine that's probably hard given the full-time nature of his day job. You built pedals?
I did. I built, like I had pedals that I liked, but, other companies made. And I'm like, I wonder if I could do blah, blah, blah. So rather than just modifying it, I would build the pedal and make the changes. A very good friend of mine in a band called Kowloon City, this gentleman named Scott, who's an excellent recording engineer, he had one Distortion Plus that sounded amazing. And he didn't know why this one sounded different. And we took it apart, and it had a broken clipping diode. So it was only one clipping diode, totally asymmetrical, sounded crazy and awesome. So I built him a pedal that replicated this broken sound.
Yeah.
And then his band got a kind of hardcore underground popular, and people started emailing me because they wanted to sound like him. They wanted the gear he used. I'm like, oh, okay. So I was building these pedals for a while. When I got the job at Line 6, I can't really build pedals anymore for commercial purposes.
Sure.
Occasionally I'll work on something, but I can't really make it myself.
Yeah.
But I've kind of, now Scott is actually making a pedal called the KWB. Scott is making his version of the KWB. The KWB is inside Helix, but I can't really make a commercial product under my own name like I do.
Well, you're describing actually is in the Helix world.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about making Helix stuff. I can take all my gear and I can mod it, and then I can have it and use it myself.
Oh, that's excellent. That's really excellent. Sephiroth actually had a 3-part question. We'll finish off his questions. He's going to ask the first of the probably can't answers. Is there anything that can be shared about the eventual replacement of the Helix family?
Sure. It's going to be awesome. And something will be released by Line 6 sometime in the future.
See, I was wrong. I was completely wrong. You totally answered the question. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's not like we're doing nothing. Like there's many employees at Line 6, and we all have jobs, and we all get paid money.
But you also get paid to be quiet about it.
To make stuff.
Yeah.
And so stuff's being made.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. I saw some funny stuff go by in the comments. I don't want to miss. Amal Karki says that you look like a young and slightly nerdy James Hetfield. I agree with that. I think that's good, whatever that means.
At least I'm not getting Austin Powers. When my hair was shaggier and the glasses, I get Austin Powers, and I just wanted to cry and crawl into a hole.
There you go. All right.
Yeah. Just
because I'm in this section of the chat, Conan Neutron says, what things can working musicians do to help mitigate equipment failures on the road? It's a little off topic, Conan. But
Conan is a near and dear friend of mine.
Oh, is it true?
Yes, I was in a band with him for many years called Replicator.
Well, then clearly you know what answer he's looking for.
Conan, wrap your cables correctly. Conan was a very rough and crazy guitarist and would find the weak point of any gear. If you want to test gear, give it to Conan. He'll break it for you.
Okay.
It's spectacular.
That's great.
But, we toured for years, and, I had a little toolbox, and I kept a schematic of his amp in the toolbox with my little soldering kit and stuff, because at least once a tour, I had pulled his amp out of the chassis and I had to solder it, like, oh, this resistor came loose, something broke. It was, it's good. He booked the shows. He is a booking machine. He has a podcast. He has a live webcam show. He has a band that tours like 3 months out of the year.
Does he go by that name everywhere?
Yeah, Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. He's
everybody don't leave the stream, but everybody log in and sign up for Conan's stream.
But I was the tech. I was the tech in the band. He was the face of the band.
Okay, gotcha.
It was a good relationship. It was he's like the most solid dude.
That's great. All right, next question here. Max Headroom says, Line 6 has always been an innovative group that has changed the way players interact with guitars and gear. How is Line 6 working to improve the interaction process going forward? What new features can we expect from future Line 6 or Helix iterations? This is sort of related to the last question. And then as a side note, loves 5-watt world, and he loves particularly the Adriatic delay. Is that you?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Adriatic. Somehow I'll start from the back and go forward.
I can't believe I had to ask that out loud. That Ben Adrian, Adriatic delay have anything to do with you?
So, I love gear. I will name all the gear and all the brands that I love. I love the gear that Line 6 makes. Other gear exists in the world too. I love that. My favorite delay is the Boss DM2. We already had a model of the Boss DM2 in Helix, but I wanted modulation. I wanted more than it could offer.
Okay.
So I just and I wanted more delay time. So I modeled my own DM2, and then I added more delay time, and then I added modulation, and just kind of zhuzhed it up however I thought sounded cool.
You zhuzhed.
Yeah. So it's kind of like if someone told me to build them a DM2 clone with your favorite stuff, it would be the Adriatic delay. And someone at work was like, what are we going to call this? And I was like, how about the Adriatic? I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't name it after myself, but if someone else wants to name it after me, I guess.
I know. If the guys in your team kind of gang up on you and then.
Yeah. If it's a nickname, at least it's a nickname I don't mind.
There you go.
And then the earlier question was, what can you do to make things earlier? There's a lot of features we're looking at for new products that involve making things easier for the musician when they're on stage. I can't tell you any of what they are, but Eric Klein is really working hard behind the scenes to try to make not just the player experience as like dialing in tones, but just having a pal on stage to help you out.
So say who Eric is.
Eric Klein is the guy who is the product owner for Helix and many other products. So he, kind of came up with a lot of the original user interface. He came up with maybe a lot of the look of what it was going to be on the screens. He is a long time. He's actually kind of a synth guy, electronic music guy, but he's done many guitar products too. And he really gets into the details. Back when we had an office that everyone went to, he would run around with like 4 life-size printouts of a potential product, and he'd throw it on the floor in front of you, like, which one looks better on the floor? Which one is going to be easier on your feet? Like, what the spacing? Like, if you have to do this, would you rather do this or this or this? And he's super smart.
Yeah, that's
great. He's very in-depth with his work. He's fantastic.
Yeah, I knew this would happen. So you've touched a couple of times on the actual process for building a model. And I kicked off with the story about the litigator, and you and I talked about it the other day because I have a fondness for players that use Dumbles. And overdrive specialists, to be fair, because Dumble is a multi-sound universe. People talk it like it's just overdrives, but ODSs. But talk a little bit about how you, because you've been there 11 years, how you used to do modeling an amp and how you do it now. I was floored when you told me the other day that you actually had an electronic, like a schematic, and you could, in a digital world where you could go in and go, what if we change the screen resistor on this and pluck it and put a different value, and then that went through the model. I was I just couldn't believe that was a part of the universe. That's incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's not. It's a lot of times it's more replicating the results than putting in a bunch of values and having something churn out a number. Because frankly, if like, you look at like the RC values of a resistor and a capacitor and the gain, like the tube like gain charts and load lines and everything, and then you measure it, it's actually going to come out different because there's just so much crazy tolerance in the world.
Right.
So we take a lot of measurements and then we put in, DSP things in our little software so we can replicate the results as you iterate through an amp: gain stage, volume control, gain stage, tone controls, gain stage, voltage divider, and low pass filter, phase inverter. And we just kind of work our way slowly through the amps. And I've kind of spaced on the question.
Well, basically talk about how you do it now, and you're talking about how you, real quickly tell the story about the litigator, and then I'm going to have you tell, because it's the next question. Ben Adrian he says the cartographer is his favorite amp in the Helix world, and it doesn't exist in the real world. So if you want to start with the cartographer and then work your way to the litigator, I'll be fine with that.
Well, let's do the other way around. So initially, before I got there was less DSP to use. And the models were maybe a little more, I always like to say it was like if you go to the state fair and you get a caricature drawing of yourself, they always highlight whatever is the most broad and feature that stands out. If you have a big nose, your character will have a really big nose. So I think like a lot of the early Line 6 models were kind of like that. The Twins were super clean. The Marshalls had that mid-range crunch. They went in great. And then starting in Helix and even late HD 500, it was more, we could get a lot more stages of modeling, like a lot more little things happening within the amp model because we had more DSP to work with. And so it kind of became, I would say, 90 to 95% the science and matching the exact sounds. And then the last 5% is just tuning it by ear and making it feel good.
This now the recording studio time really plays into things like that. Yeah, that's great.
And just having like, designed my own overdrives and stuff, and was like, okay, maybe try this, see how that feels. I've been playing guitar for 30 something years, whatever. Yeah. But then, so the litigator was the first time it was like, I want to make, let's just say, the D style amp. I have nothing against Dumble, but I wasn't really looking to make an exact Dumble. But there's something about those amps, when you play it, it just feels good, and it's like it communicates back with you. And when that is happening as a guitar player, like that's when, at least me and a lot of people I've talked to, you really feel like it's like this joy, like this interaction, this is living and breathing, and I'm a part of it. And I wanted to make an amp model that could do that. And I just decided I'm just going to ignore the real world. I'm going to start with like the skeleton of an amp model, and I'm just going to move parts around and change gain stage values and just kind of imagine what I would do if I was designing this, and then try to just come up. So I could going on in the, oh, JB just paid some money. So going on in the litigator, there's probably a little more sag than you would get in the real world, because it really, you feel that when you're playing. When you're turning the drive knobs, EQ is changing behind the scenes at multiple points in the amplifier. So it's really kind of never gets too farty, it never gets too thin. It's just always kind of staying in that sweet spot of sound. God, I made it such a long time ago, it's hard to remember.
Didn't you tell me the other day that there's certain models that you kind of wish you could do over because there's more things you could do now?
Yeah, we found out like kind of what aspects of modeling provide a more either realistic or fun sound. And when we didn't really necessarily know that, we were very science driven by the first round of models. And then as we played, we realized people responded more to the later models, where we kind of wanted to make sure it was really fun to play. And we weren't just like, we used to call it warts and all. Like if you take a photo, you get everything in that photo. Good and bad. And now it's like sometimes we realize that, we matched all the bad stuff and people don't like the bad stuff. And that's what you tune out anyway if you're recording guitar in a studio when you put it in the finished mix. Right. So if we can reduce some of the bad stuff and amplify. That's kind of cheesy. And embiggen some of the good stuff.
Did you say embiggen? That's good.
I said embiggen, yes.
I like that.
Then that would be a good
stream. It's just world.
It's a Simpsons reference. People know. Let's see. But yeah, so that came about.
Litigator, then talk about the cartographer and whether it is an amp that lives in the real world.
So yeah, this is kind of the cartographer amp. You can see the C there. That is a sticker from my old band Cartographer. And this was the amp I used in that band. And it's a heavily modified Trainer.
Which model?
Now, Trainers used to be the secret of the world because they're these amazing sounding amps from Canada. And I think the word finally got out about 5 or 6 years ago. But still, don't tell anyone. Just
yeah. We're not talking about that now.
And they're really great. I got that one from my friend Jeremy, who I see has commented in the chat.
Right there, asking for Carlsboro amps.
Yes,
we're going to get all this kind of stuff, right?
He is an esoteric gentleman. But he sold this amp to me in a semi to non-working state for a lovely $250. And because it had been modded and destroyed, I felt no qualms going in there and making it my own. So I based it on the 2204 circuit. Mm-hmm. But I put in everything I'd learned modding those amps, fixing those amps, looking at other amps that were also inspired by that circuit. I added for those who want to get a little deeper, like the gain knob on a 2204 is between the first gain stage and the second gain stage.
For those that might not know, a 2204 is a
Marshall JSAM 800, also JMP Mark II, depending on which year. Okay. So I added a gain knob here on between the second and the third gain stage. So I could actually kind of tune the way it was going to clip. Just picked whatever tone stack values I like. You just solder in, solder out components until you find something that sounds good. Educated guesses.
Yeah.
And just after about a 7-year project, I ended up with this amp. I took it into work because I was kind of just doing something on it after hours. Someone heard it and like, you should model that. I'm like, really? Like, I play my crazy esoteric aluminum guitar through this esoteric modified amp in my very loud, noisy, transgressive rock band. Why would anyone want this? But I put it in and it's been fantastic. And I'm super happy about it. And people like it. It's so good.
It is one of the popular ones. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm stoked. It's great.
That's great. Well, let's do JB's top chat question. JB Eccles, friend of both the channel and it seems Mr. Adrian's here.
Yes.
What are your current favorite small and large cabs in the Helix world? And I'm going to try them out during the stream. Don't give us too much attention here, JB.
Cabinets. I really like the Princeton Cabinet, which is called the U.S. Princess in Helix, because it's actually based on this one right there, my own Princeton. That's the model that made it in there.
As is the Princess, right?
Yeah, the U.S. Princess. Yeah, and so that's my small cabinet in Helix.
Right.
The large cabinet, I really go back to the Blackback, the 412 Blackback, which is the Park cabinet.
Yeah.
65 watts. I forget exactly.
I think the Blackback cab's 35s.
Maybe it is.
Because we used it in the preset pack that Jeff Mackerlin and I did for a whole bunch of different Marshall mod packages for the Clapton package that we put together. And we would go to the stuff with the specific name. We'd go, yeah, it doesn't sound as good as the Park. Oh, it doesn't sound as good as the Blacks. And it should be greens. But, you build these things with your ears. You don't.
Yeah.
You kind of step past the labels because you're modeling a particular 4x12 with greenbacks,
Yeah.
So, yeah. Not Claptons. So,
I mean, as a recording engineer, you can get away with so much stuff you wouldn't expect to make an awesome guitar sound. If you told people what you were really doing, they would be like, that's what's on the record.
That's what ended up on the track. Yeah.
I love that.
We got a top chat from Frank Richot.
He's the director of logistics. I forget his exact title at line 6.
Oh, no kidding. Frank, thank you, sir. Coming in here and
YDG.
There you go. Let me do some more questions. The people are flying by here. A lot of people saying hi to each other in the chat. A lot of people that I think we'd all recognize. Your friend Conan's making trouble.
As he does.
Kreenar Kilku, my buddy, is frequent here and a frequenter on John's channel as well, says, Ben, would you say that the stock settings right after pulling up an amp aren't very ideal? Say the litigator sounds quite bright, but the right settings, it's the best amp. With the right setting, it's the best amp. So this is probably where you're going to talk about all the variables. A lot of variables.
Default settings are done by a human being who plays guitar and is usually a pretty advanced guitar player. So it depends on your guitar. Depends on how your fingers hit the strings. Depends on what your ears like out of a guitar sound.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the default settings, but if you don't like them, there's knobs. It's awesome.
As my friend Dan Lurie, the amp tech, used to say, I would say, well, I'm not crazy about it. He's like, you know what? These things turn. You see these things, they turn. You'd always say.
But, and to be fair, I have two favorite guitars right now. One of my favorite guitars is the Telecaster I was showing you earlier. It's an Ultra Tele, pretty low watt pickups. Low watt, that's bad. Low output pickups. And then the other one is this aluminum guitar made by the Electrical Guitar Company, which has the hottest pickups known to man. I mean, these things will shred your ears off in the coolest way possible. But if I try to play those guitars with the same Helix preset, right, one is going to sound awesome and one is going to sound terrible.
Right.
Because they just don't. I've had to do put in, I want to use this preset, but I want to use my loud guitar. I have to put in an 8 dB volume cut as a block in the front, and then it'll sound okay. But then I'll have to adjust the tone knobs. But if you don't like the default settings, I'm sorry. Please experiment with it. But those default settings did work for somebody who is probably a very advanced guitar player.
There you go. Let's see. I actually have let's do. I have a top chat from our buddy Bill Sanderson. Bill says, Ben, the DL4 is one of my all-time favorite delays. Have the current models in the Helix world been updated, or are they identical to the legacy product?
Oh, they're 100% updated.
Oh,
in fact, everything in Helix is all what we call HX level modeling because someone needed a term. But then we have a legacy category in Helix that has all the old models. You can pull up the DL4 era of models, or you can pull up the new ones. And then in the new DL4, the DL4 Mark II, you can do both. There's a bunch of new delays, and then you hit a legacy button, and then you have all the exact delays that were in the original DL4.
Nice. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. I got a question. I actually had another a guy here who's asking about, he said he absolutely loves his bunny driver. Like to know if there'll be any more bend pedals in the future. We answered this. I hope he was on the stream.
No. The bunny drive was a version of a Red Llama, which was a version of the Tube Sound Fuzz by Craig Anderton. Craig Anderton was the first book I got on effects.
Oh, no kidding.
Anderton is also, he had the electronic projects for musicians.
Yeah, in guitar.
Craig Anderton is a fan of Helix and wrote a book about Helix, and it blows my mind. I think I almost cried when I found out Craig Anderton, the guy who unknowingly taught me about cool effects, is a fan of what I do now. I've met super famous rock stars with his job, but meeting Craig Anderton was maybe oh, you're that guy. But yeah, so try the Alpaca Rouge in Helix, because it's a Red Llama, which is a version of the Tube Sound Fuzz, which is what the bunny drive was based on.
Right. Yeah, cool. The way huge one. John Nathan Cordy has a question. He sent me 2 questions. He says, maybe ask him if there are any Holy Grail amps on his wish list that he'd like to get into the Helix universe. That you'd like to model.
I'd love to get a real Dumble. If anyone wants to loan me a Dumble, I'll totally model it for you.
Oh, there's got to be somebody on the stream that can make this happen.
I got into a real train wreck, and that was mind-blowingly cool.
Did somebody lend you one to use for the modeling?
Yes.
Wow, that's so cool.
It was. It ended up being very, very good. It was Dan Boole of 65 Amps. That. And it belonged to his friend. He was extremely gracious. I've had nothing but good times working with Dan a little bit here and there at Line 6.
David Barber's a good friend of mine, and David has a D-style pedal called the Burn Unit. And the first time I got on the phone with him, I'm like, your pedal sounds amazing. Like, how did you get it? He goes like, yeah, a friend lent me a Dumble for 6 months. And I was like, excuse me? It's like, yeah, it sat on my bench for 6 months, and I would literally, get to bounce back and forth. And it was mostly what you were saying before. It was feel. He's like, it was just working and working and working on feel. So the second question that Perry had, that John had here, I've got Perry's underneath. Ask him to what extent. Let me see if I can get this. Maybe you could ask him about to what extent do amps that are the same model vary. I think, yeah, right. And then, like, personally, I've never had the opportunity to compare two identical amps side by side. I think it's something that we sort of take for granted when making general comparisons when we say things like Vox AC30 or whatever.
Well, I mean, there's amps models that are close. Like we have a real top boost AC30 and we have a Fawn non-top boost AC30. They sound pretty different in the room. We have multiple non-master volume Marshalls at Line 6, and they all have their own character. It's shocking. And in fact, there's the Brit Trem model in Helix, which it's basically like the plexi with a tremolo circuit in it. And Dan Boole was actually playing that amp in a demo at our work one time, bring him back in, and he's like, this Marshall, there's something about it. And sure enough, we went in and we played it, and everyone in sound design listening like, this one sounds great. We have to model this one. And so that's why there's the actual like plexi and the Brit Trem, which is basically just a different version of the plexi. If you look at where the signal goes through, it's almost identical.
Yeah.
But it's just a totally different feel, a different kind of compression, a different kind of sponginess to it. And I prefer the new one, the Brit Trem, to the other one. I mean, they're both great, but
interesting.
But, each one's gonna have that. And that's actually what we strive for when we're matching our models. Because when we finish a model, we'll set up an A/B. We'll take a line out of the model from the speaker jack, have the cabinet blasting in another room, but then we'll match the electrical signal coming from the speaker jack going into the same cab sim that the new model is being, and we'll just toggle back and forth. And I'd like to say we can usually get it to sound closer there than you would if you put two of this identical amp models sitting side by side.
Nice.
So that's kind of our litmus test.
That's great. It's time for me to do my midstream ad that I'm adding my sponsor. So I'm going to read through this. I wrote this earlier, and this is blessed by the boys and girls over at Ish Guitars. The 5-Watt World live stream is brought to you with the support of Ish Guitars. Ish stocks a carefully curated set of brands, including PRS, Dingwall, Martin, Spectre, Strandberg, Music Man, Gratsch Federa, Heritage, Ritter, Ibanez Taylor, Vox, and Victory, just to name a few. Since opening in 2014, it's grown to be one of the top PRS private stock and wood library dealers in the world. They also deal in vintage pieces, and I've actually had a chance to handle both a 1960 Gibson Sunburst Les Paul and a 56 Strat that have come through the shop in the last 6 months. I have since learned that when they ask me if I want to touch these things, I say no. They work with manufacturers to carry limited instrument runs with unique features. This is actually something they do a lot of, and it's one of the coolest things to me about the shop. They do special wood runs or colors, you name it. They highlight the fact that every instrument's unique, and unique instruments are worth pursuing. Most importantly, the shop's run by musicians. If you call, they're the person that picks up the phone, plays either bass or guitar or both. People have heard me say it here before. It's not an exaggeration to say I moved to Syracuse in part to be able to work with the guys at Ish. Their phone number and the link to their website is in the description, and I'd like to thank them for the support on the live stream today. So now we're going to do Perry, my script editor's questions, and then we're going to jump back into the chat. Perry would like to know, and this gives a little bit away about what Perry does, maybe. Does Line 6 use any machine learning in their modeling? And if no, do they have plans to? And are they sticking with more traditional DSP methods?
At the moment, we are not using any machine learning in modeling. We have experimented behind the scenes with a number of different things, which may or may not have included machine learning.
That may or may not have.
May or may not have included. But we definitely would like to speed it up, because right now all the modeling is a very hands-on process. It's very much a capture some data, match the data, listen, capture the data, match the data, listen, and the results are fantastic, and we love it, but it does take a while. So anything we can do to speed things up will be, useful, because it means more models out to the customer, faster releases,
Right.
more models at launch of new products. So
Yeah.
we're definitely interested in any and all techniques that might speed things up or make things more interesting. But I also, people are like, are you scared of losing your job? I'm like, not really. You still need to have someone who's an expert listen to them and play them and make sure that they sound correct. But maybe a robot will put me out of my job someday. But I guess that's that's what retirement's for.
I think the robots will always just be doing the drafts. I got two good questions here. Pixelot wants to know, as an HX Stomp user, why is the high cut on the stock cabs set as a default of 8K when most real amp speakers tail off around 5K?
Oh, that's pretty inside baseball.
You want to take that offline?
So it's just a
Are you just giving us some room to work? Like,
Yeah, the thing is there's a little bit more extension in a lot of the cabinets than I think might happen in real life, or that it is at least audible by human ears in real life.
Right.
Because we have I can't say exactly how we did it, but there were at some points test microphones involved, and there were some measurements taken very on axis near the center of the cone, where you can get greater high frequency extension.
Right.
And then we sometimes shape from there.
Well, and it's good to remind people that this is a curve. It's not like the curve hits a wall and drops. It's a curve. So it's tapering away into inaudible. And as you said, you just named about 4 variables that would have a really dramatic effect on how somebody might want to use that model. So.
Yeah. So, we just realized most people were turning them down anyway. So one update, they just went through with the default settings and we took everything for guitar cabs to 8K because we just felt that was a good starting point.
Cool. Dontre Dog Borsa is a friend of yours. You're grinning already. No.
No, I'm just happy to be here.
He says,
you don't know what's in this can.
Was the Mark IV one of the hardest ones to model?
Yes.
There you go.
No, it has so many variables and so many switches. And I thought, okay, there's like 2 or 3 channels. I can just model the one and then take the power amp and then put the other preamps in front of it. No, it revoices that. And then all the components that you're supposed to it uses high value resistors to take things out of the circuit, but those high value resistors still interact with the signal. It's not a switch. You still have these 1 meg resistors blocking things. So it's like lots of crazy things are happening. It took me too long to do those models.
Nice. Well, it's great that somebody would intuit that. Tim Lurch is in the stream. He says that one of his first amp was a Trainer. He wasn't sure why, but that was the one he ordered from a catalog, and he lucked out because it sounded great. So
awesome.
No doubt about it. Looking for questions here. Robzilla says, Ben, I was so dismayed by my purchase of the Firehawk FX and how poor Line 6 supported it once the Helix happened. Has Line 6 gotten better with support for older products? Well, this is not kind of your department.
I hope so. I don't know. I'll always try to answer.
Well, and I'll tell you, and I will say that probably in the future, I'd like to do this as more of a regular feature because I really enjoy. It's funny. I'm seen kind of as a traditionalist because I do the history videos, but if people know that I'm very into the Line 6 stuff, that I got a Strandberg sitting around the room here, I'm going to have other folks on the stream. I'll probably have Eric come sometime and we can beat on Eric, somebody in the future modeling, et cetera, whatever. The would you call him a product owner? We can beat on him about that. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I could say more. I think it was just a transitional era at Line 6, and the people who were really behind that product might not have been necessarily around when it actually reached the public.
Yeah,
exactly. But I don't remember exactly.
No, that was before my Line 6 time. Sean Macy says, Ben, please release the Helix version of the Kowloon Walled Bunny as a pedal. I assume that was one of your pedals?
Yeah, that was my pedal that was the MXR clone that was my friend's broken MXR. It was a pedal. It then got modeled. My friend still sells it as a pedal. If you go to antisleep.com, I think you can even order one from him that he makes.
Oh, really?
But yeah, he I kind of just, I always thought of myself as not like I'm doing anything revolutionary. I was a guy who could solder a pedal together. And I was a guy who was like, I think this pedal sounds a little better with a little more low end and maybe this diode instead. And I made it. And if someone liked it, I'd make it for my friends. And I just kind of went that way. There's no secrets here. It's stuff you bought at, Radio Shack or Al Lasher's if you're from the Bay Area, or wherever you get your electronic doodads from. But I'm not trying to hide anything. So, there was one time I just basically published a schematic and said, here's how to modify an MXR Distortion Plus into a KWB pedal. So I think that page got deleted from the internet because it was on someone else's server, but there's nothing magic or secret going on. It's just being a nerd in your basement.
Nice. Steve Moore, friend of the channel, says, is there a model of a Gibson Skylark in the Line 6 range somewhere?
Oh, no, that would be fun, though. Those are great. There is the Gibson EH185, which is from 1939. And it's called has a field coil speaker, which means the P plus voltage of the amp actually magnifies the electromagnetic speaker. And it sounds super raw and gnarly, and you could probably play doom metal with it, and everyone would think it was a totally fine tone for that, but it was made in 1939.
That's great. And you guys have a model of a GA40 as well, right? Somebody help me.
Yes.
Yeah, baby will know. Yeah.
It was the Victoria version of the GA40 that we modeled. I can't remember what it is.
Electro something.
Yeah.
Electrodyne or something.
No, that's amazing.
That's an actual thing, yeah, right.
But yeah, Sam would know. Sam's listening. He did the model for that. It's awesome. Sam Huang.
It's awesome. I actually used it because David Grissom used a 58 GA40 on his first record a ton. And actually he said in interviews before that though he uses a Tweed Deluxe a lot, his favorite Tweed sound is the sound of that. Actually, I was just talking to Bill Sanderson yesterday about he has a GA40 clone that I built. And there's nothing like the tremolo in those Gibson amps because they weren't working out of the same cookbook as Leo at all. Kind of like Ampeg, I think. We were talking about how those two companies are so unique. And I remember when I was working with Dan Lurie and we were looking at the tremolo circuit, and there's this whole cascade of 220 puffs, and it's like Dan's like, don't change any of this because I don't know what it does. I don't know how that works. and he's been doing it for 30 years. So let's see here. Perry says that he's willing to do consulting work and be paid in Stratocasters.
But we don't make Stratocasters, so I don't know if that's a currency for us.
There you go. JB Eckel came back around to say he never tried the blackback cabs. So you answered his question. Holy crap. He said, it sounds amazing. There you go.
Hooray.
Somebody said it gets more technical. Terry Beaton says, does it get more technical? Let's see. I'm looking for questions here. We got a good afternoon from Waterloo, Quebec. Perry wants to know, Perry, I was saving one of your questions here. You jumped in the stream. Ben, has Ben ever attempted to model an amp and given up? For example, is there an amp whose magic just doesn't seem to translate to digital? I can't believe you're asking him to talk about this in public. He'd probably break down and have a tear.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think there's anyone where I've ever given up. There was one time where, this was before my time, where we did an amp model. It was released, and then they realized, there was an error, so they redid the model, and that was done in the update, came out in an update, but then people complained that the model changed, so we had to release the original model with the kind of incorrectness as an original model.
So you had both then?
Yeah.
Which is kind of like when you were saying earlier. Oh, I think it was when we talked the other day. You were saying, there's some you'd like to redo, but you'd have to do that too. You'd have to have you'd have to have a legacy amp category.
Yeah.
Right. So, right. Elon Mulder says, "Hey Ben, you ever consider collaborating with other pedal manufacturers like Chase with Audio or Old Blood Noise to build program certain effects for the Helix?"
I mean, I would love to do that. I think those kind of interactions are above my pay grade, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I'm friends and acquaintances with a lot of pedal builders, and it's nice to talk shop and see what's going on in the world. And we have a few people who work for us out of Canada called Victoria, who I don't know what I can or can't say, but they design some pretty popular pedals from other companies. So now we get to exploit their knowledge. So in a way, that's almost like doing a collaboration, but they actually work for Yamaha now. So
right.
Yeah.
Sam Huang, I assume, works for Line 6. He jumped in to tell us that model of the J40 is the Electro King, or that Victoria amp was the Electro King.
Yep.
Cool. And BV is reminding me that a GA40 was a 15-watt 1x12 from 1952. I think that's the release. I think it was released actually in like 48. BV. The amp changed so much. There's so many different versions. The one that I built that Bill has now is actually a combination of the 58 and the 61, which are two of the more desirable ones. I also built a B15 flip top, which is kind of similar in that Dan took the design and took things from the two that are most popular and kind of mashed them together and fixed the grounding and stuff. So I told Bill that I got another DGT recently from the guys at Ish, and I told Bill that I might need to build myself another one of those or borrow his back, but he didn't seem excited about that idea. Let's see. So this is interesting. I'm kind of saving this. We're getting close to the end, but I'm sort of saving this. Let me make sure I don't have how many in the chat that I want to do first. Brighton Thoughts says, would Ben respond with those who think Line 6 oversaturates the market? Do you mean with too many models, Brighton, or I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, Line 6 comes off as a big company, and obviously with the support of Yamaha, it's great. But there's really only 100 Yamaha guitar. There's maybe only 100-ish people. That's sound design, DSP engineering, firmware, hardware, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, finance, payroll, sales and marketing, human resources.
Tell everybody how many people are in your group, because
there's three.
Sorry,
there's me.
Yeah.
There's Sam and Ryan, and that's the sound design team. There's also another guy named Troy who comes in and helps us out occasionally, who's really awesome. But so all the modeling is done by three people, with helps. We pull in other resources occasionally to help us out if we're in a pickle. But for the most part, it's three people doing all the models.
That's so cool. Let's see here. I got a question. Dr. Hard Rock 94 says, any hope of a Noble's ODR style pedal?
Yeah, sure. There's plenty of hope. We like it. It's definitely been on the short list.
Okay.
Sometimes you just have to have the person getting some free time at the right time, and suddenly, okay, this is cooling down, but it's definitely on the short list. We all like it. We all know it as a sound design team.
Cool. Jeff McElwain wants to know if there are any new IRs in the pipeline. He's very excited for some additional IRs.
I mean, IRs, you can get an IR from anyone and load up in Helix.
Right.
Other than that, I can't talk about it.
Well done.
There's lots of people doing lots of cool stuff at Line 6.
There's my segue to my last good question. The one I've been saving from Perry, which I thought was a very interesting question that Perry came up with. He says, given kind of where we are with vintage amps getting more expensive and aging out and components breaking down and tubes being sort of questionable about the future, does Line 6 feel like they have a role in keeping these legendary tones alive and available in the future? Do you feel like you're archiving these amp tones? Do you get that feeling?
Kind of. When the whole Ukraine thing started, I'm like, are we going to run out of tubes? like everyone kind of started to think that, and I was like, I think it'll be a while. I think there's plenty sitting in boxes and warehouses, places, but I think there's going to be kind of like a De Beers diamond market thing where they can only come from certain places and they only release a certain amount. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'd love to think that these are kind of the sounds of things that either people can't get or no longer work or are breaking down. I think there's always going to be hobbyists who can tear apart old gear and fix it up and make it cool. But and here's something I've talked about in a number of places as well. Guitar is kind of changing in the modern world. And whenever there's like a band, I don't want to be ageist about this because I am definitely coming from the when rock guitar was king land. But I think a lot of younger bands, they see cool gear and they like it, but they're not basing their guitar sounds on the classic guitar amps.
Right.
They're plugging into what they think is some cool piece of guitar gear. They're turning knobs until a cool sound is coming out or something like, and then he or she is like, this is great. Boom, let's rock with this. And they use it. So as much as I want to curate a historical archive of classic guitar sounds, and I hope that we do that, I also want to give the possibility for people to tweak the gear to come up with sounds that they can't get anywhere else. And that to me is just as interesting, as exciting as the classic sounds.
That's a great answer. That's wonderful. Let's see. Any other final ones here? Any plans? Somebody, Karen Bassett wants to know, any plans to create pickup modelers?
I don't think so, but Yamaha does a lot of cool stuff with guitars, and they definitely helped out with some of the later Variac stuff. But I don't know. I feel like there's kind of a secret door that I don't get to see into, so I can't really comment. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. Well, it immediately made me think of is a conversation I had with Jeff McErlane yesterday, where we were talking on his stream about the power of an EQ to take a humbucker towards the sound of a Gretsch pickup, or towards a P90 sound, or fatten up a single coil to sound more like a P90, and those kinds of things. But again, there's so many variables that would be it's kind of impossible. It's sort of like somebody should do a course. Somebody like us should do a course where you talk about using your EQ to move a single coil towards something else. So somebody out there ought to be able to do that for us.
Do you remember there was a pedal made by Akai that was basically had two graphic EQs and a gain and a volume, and one was before the distortion and one was after the distortion, and it was the perfect instructional platform to explain pre-filtering and post-filtering.
That's so cool. No, I know.
It's really neat. So it's like, I feel like in Helix you could do the same thing. You could throw an amp model in there that's already distorting, and then you could put two EQ blocks, one in front and one after, and just try doing this and doing this to a different frequency, and just like, what happens if I distort this, puts just frequency and distortion? What happens if I cut or boost the frequency after the distortion? And there's so many sounds that can be found by just having fun like that for a while.
Yeah. I'm at 5 o'clock, but there actually was something that I originally thought we'd spend a lot of time on that I didn't have in the list, and I feel bad. And that is that I've been playing, we said it before we started the stream, that I've been playing with wet dry with a pair of Catalyst 60s here and having a great time. Talk a little bit about what you said to me the other day about how you built and chose the models for the Catalyst amps, because you were involved in that as well. All
right, sure. So yeah, the Catalyst kind of was like, everyone was excited by what happened with the Litigator, and here's this kind of unique amp model that's really fun to play and had a great response. So the idea for Catalyst is, we knew we were making a low-cost amp. We knew we were doing this for the broadest amount of guitarists. So we wanted to have all the standard styles of amps in there. But the idea wasn't just to be like, here's a crunch amp, here's a metal amp, and just kind of pull from Helix or pull from somewhere else. We wanted them to have the same kind of feel. So I went in and I took existing models and I tweaked them. And the whole idea was, make it a fun amp to play. Pair it with a booster that normally that classic amp would be paired with. But the idea is, like, we really wanted it to be one of the things where you pick it up and you start playing and you just don't want to set your guitar down because you're having so much fun and because it's really responding and you feel like you're having that communication between, what your fingers are doing when they hit the strings and pressing the strings down, and what's happening back when it's coming from the speaker.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Make it fun. Great. That'll wrap it up for. That will wrap it up. Boy, there you go.
Words.
This is a technical failure that I've been waiting for all day. I'd like to once again thank Bebe for being here and moderating for us. And of course, a big thank you to Ben Adrian for being here, taking the time to hang out with us, answer these questions. Remember to check out the links for Ish Guitars down in the description. I'm going to let John Cordy play us out with the intro that I had before. Until next time, everybody. Thanks again, Ben, and we'll have you back. It was really a lot of fun.
Of course.
Until next time, thanks for being a part of 5 Watt World, everybody. Take care.